UUCY is such a special place for me. I came here seeking a spiritual home that would accept all of me, who I love, who I am, my race, and I found unexpected joy in finding my partner, Tesla, here today.
Call me by my name, know me in my truth. Trust the sacred flame that burns in me and you. Listen to my song, I'm gentle and I'm strong, with a love I can't contain. Won't you call me by my name? Tell me who you are, let your truth be known. Cast away your fear, for you are not alone. Share your hopes and dreams, together we'll be free to rejoice with all our hearts. Won't you tell me who you are? We come to learn the gifts we each can give. We offer up in turn a better way to live. The stories that we share will show us how to care. You can help me do my part when you tell me who you are. You can fill the world with grace when you call me by my name.
We will now light the chalice, the symbol of our living faith. If you are joining us online, you may wish to light a candle or chalice of your own. May the light of this flame and the weight of our words inspire us to use our powers to heal and not harm, to help and not hinder, to serve the spirit of life in loving affection and trusting hope. Our next song is Blessed Are the Poor. Please join us in singing that together.
Blessed are the poor, ones who have been humbled. They will find abundance waiting at the door. Now they have a place with nothing wanting, finally belonging, radiant with grace. Let us be assured love has gone before. Blessed are the poor, blessed are the queer, the one way or another. Everybody wonders, am I welcome here? Love has saved a seat before the table. waiting for the grateful, laden with a feast. Cast away your fear, hear if you can hear. Blessed are the queer, blessed are we all, no matter love or gender, joyfully together, answering the call. All that we become, we offer to our neighbors. Once we all were strangers, now we have a home, where our hearts are whole, where we are consoled. Blessed are we all.
We've now come to the time in our service, which is the time for all ages. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you all a book called The Gay BCs, and that's written by M.L. Webb. A is for arrow and ace, words we use to say that love and attraction may be felt in many ways. B is for bi. You can shout it out loud. I like more than one gender, and that makes me proud. C is for coming out. You're ready to share what you feel deep inside. It's okay to be scared. D is for drag. You can strut and dance in clothes that you love, dresses, heels, or pants. E is for equality. We're on the same team. We all have the right to love, hope, and dream. F is for family, related or found. They'll stick by your side through your ups and downs. G is for gay. This word's just for you, if you like someone and you share their gender too. H is for hope. Dream up a life you'll love. The sky is the limit. Shoot for the stars above. I is for intersex. Some are born with different parts. Everybody and every body is a work of amazing art. J is for joy. You can sing, dance, and play. Find moments of sunshine in each and every day. K is for Kiki, when friends come together to catch up on news, gossip, and weather. L is for lesbian. It's love and affection between two special girls who share a connection. M is for mountain, the peaks that you'll move with courage and strength found deep inside you. N is for non-binary. The gender binary doesn't apply to who you are, how you feel, and how you identify. O is for orientation. It's a balance between who you are, who you love, and how you want to be seen. P is for pan. You connect with the vibe. No matter the gender, it's about what's inside. Q is for queer, an inclusive term. It is used to show pride, unite, and affirm. R is for respect. It's the right decision to treat everyone fairly. Make it your mission. S is for sachet, a confident, fierce stride to show yourself off with attitude and pride. T is for trans. It's a brave step to take, to live as the gender you know is innate. U is for unique. There's no one like you. Embrace who you are and love what you do. V is for Vogue. Time to strike a pose, dance to the music, and put on a show. W is for Wonder. With so much to know, always ask questions to think, learn, and grow. X is for X. You can write it down when M or F isn't the right noun. Y is for you. Brave, creative, and strong. You are special and loved, and you'll always belong. Z is for Zest. Be bold and live free. Magic awaits you wherever you'll be. And now we're going to lift our voices together to sing a reprise of Blessed Are the Poor.
Blessed are the poor, ones who have been humbled. They will find abundance waiting at the door. Now they have a place with nothing wanting, finally belonging, radiant with grace. Let us be assured, love has gone before. Blessed are the poor.
Today's reading is an invitation into brave space. I invite all of us now to enter a brave space through the words of the Black, queer, female, nonprofit leader and trainer, Mickey Scott Bay Jones. This is her invitation. Together, we will create brave space, because there is no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars, and we all have caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. We will not always have what we wish it to be, but in our brave space together, we will work on it side by side. Let us begin.
So, hello everyone, and thank you for having me back in the pulpit, or the podium, here at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of York, where I have been a member since 2018. This is my third time speaking before you as a guest in our pulpit, and today, as I have for the past 2 times, I will be speaking to you on a topic that's very important to me, and that is the LGBTQIA plus community. Now we're going to get into what that means in just a moment, because I know it's a lot. But in the past services, I have given, during both Pride Month as well as the LGBTQIA plus History Month, our main topics or themes were on our first principle, which is the inherent worth and dignity of every person, as well as our third principle, the acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. Having received congregational feedback from both of those services, I realized that we had a need for a more fundamental understanding of what that acronym means, so that we could help to support and uplift this marginalized community. So for today's service, we will retain those themes of our first and third principle. However, we are also going to expand it further as we explore the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, otherwise known as our fourth guiding principle. This, I hope, will be an educational service and that you will come away with a clearer understanding of the LGBTQIA+ community and how to be a better ally to us while embracing us both within our faith and our wider community. So before we begin though, and technology's not going to like me today, so I'm going to go back to paper. Before we begin though, I want to honor a tradition of our sibling UU congregation in Gettysburg, in which, supporting the 8th principle, they follow the lead of Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, or BLUE, and share a topical insight by a person of color. Today, we will draw on the wisdom and the legacy of Marcia Pay It No Mind Johnson. As one of 2 women of color who led the Stonewall Inn uprising, Johnson was a Black transgender woman and an early activist for LGBTQIA+ rights in New York City. She established one of the country's first safe spaces for transgender and homeless queer youth, and worked tirelessly on advocating on behalf of sex workers, prisoners, and people living with HIV and AIDS. She spoke of changing history in this way. History isn't something you look back at and say it was inevitable. It happens because people make decisions that are sometimes very impulsive and of the moment. But those moments are cumulative realities. Johnson's body was pulled from the Hudson River a few days after revealing in a public interview that she had been HIV positive for 2 years. Her murder is still being investigated after 20 years. Let us begin our service. First, we must establish a base understanding of some of the most used terms within the LGBTQIA+ community. While often used together and even sometimes interchangeably, each of these have a specific meaning, and understanding such is key to having and being able to support this community. What is key is understanding what we mean when we talk about the community. So the very first term I want to establish is orientation. This is how one interacts with the world and those in it. We often use this in terms of sexual orientation or who we love. Identity is one's own understanding of themselves. Someone will be talking about their gender identity or talking about a very specific aspect of themselves that is very personal. Now, separate from both of these is expression, and everybody in this room is expressing themselves. It is our external appearance that we use to define ourselves and our identities and our orientations. Gender expression may change daily, just in the same way we change the way we dress or our clothing. Our clothing or our hair or our makeup and things like that. And we do this to present ourselves to the world. And this may include messages that relay our mood. They might be impacted by the seasons, the colors we like, and other things. So let's get into what the acronym actually means. So the very first letter is L, and the L stands for lesbian. Now, I'm going to be using very gender inclusive and more progressive terms when I'm talking about the definitions here. Now, for that, a lesbian is a female identifying individual who is attracted to other female identifying individuals. And why I say female identifying is because we are trying to create an inclusive community. Trans women are women and trans men are men. If you identify as a gender, you are that gender. It's not just something that you believe. A gay person is a male identifying individual who is attracted to other male identifying individuals. Now, someone who is bisexual is attracted to people who identify as either their own gender, so same-gendered love, or who identify as other genders, so possibly heterosexual or pretty much any type of gender, whether they're gender nonconforming or opposite gender or same gender. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. A transgender individual is someone who is biological sex, or the rather sex assigned at birth, is not in line with how they identify internally, or otherwise known as their gender identity. The term transgender is an umbrella term that we use to define a lot of the gender non-conforming community. Now, again, when we talk about a lot of these terms, we have to put it into the framework of the binary and what most people understand. So when I say gender nonconforming, that's not saying not normal. It's just when we talk about it, gender nonconforming, it's not conforming to what society generally understands as the framework. So I just want to point that out. These are not trying to be exclusive in our terminology. We're just trying to relay it back to that framework. Now, someone who identifies as queer, and some of you may have known this previously as a bad term because it was used against the community, but as pointed out in our Gay BC's book earlier, it is now being used as an inclusive and progressive way to define the community. And it's just used by people who, including myself, use it for a full umbrella to cover their sexual orientation, their gender identity, but in general, it doesn't fit the cisgendered, heteronormative society and possibly also the monogamous mold. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide, please. Someone who is, so the I in the LGBTQIA plus community is someone who is intersex. Now, we talked about that a little bit during the Gay BCs, but somebody who is intersex has either hormonal, chromosomal, or physical characteristics that don't allow them to be defined as strictly male or female. That is not to say that every intersex person is born with both sets of genitalia. They might be born with neither, or they may have undergone a terrible gender mutilation surgery as infants without the knowledge of their parents or themselves to define them within the gender binary. Luckily, in the United States, that is now an illegal surgery, but there are many intersex individuals who do not know about their intersex identity until much later in life, often when trying to procreate or when they're going through puberty as well. The A in our LGBTQIA+ does not stand for ally, but rather for asexual individuals. And that is a term for individuals who do not experience or experiences very little sexual attraction. Now, people who are asexual or ace still have very deep emotional bonds as well as romantic relationships with their partners. It just, and many of them even have children. It just means that they're not really into the actual having sexual relationships part. Thank you. Now, the plus represents many other individuals who do not find themselves to fit any of these other labels. For them, their labels are not listed, but we have that plus there to show that we still recognize them. Now, our acronym currently, and it's growing all the time, is 28 characters long. Do not ask me to tell you what all of them mean, because I cannot do so. And I'm an educator, so there's many different ones. Just know that we're trying to create as inclusive a community as possible. And I do say characters because there is a 2 you'll notice up there, and that stands for Two-Spirit individuals, which are an indigenous portion of our transgender community. There are also 4 Ps in the acronym currently, including pansexual, polysexual, polygender, and polyamorous. Yeah, so what my point is in saying that is that as a community, we wholly reject this idea that the conservative political movement is trying to say that the Ps also include pedophilia. We are not pedophiles, and we will not be associated with pedophilia. The key factor of the LGBTQIA+ community is that consent is key. Children cannot consent to sexual relationships, therefore we fully reject this idea of child loving, as they also term it. Next slide, please. Now, when we talk about the abbreviation of it, we want to remember we're trying to create that inclusive community. Now, some of you are old enough that you know that it used to be GLBT, or just maybe gay and lesbian. Well, that's not very inclusive now, is it? So we want to recognize more people. So LGBT is okay, it's a little outdated. When you add the Q on the end, you're saying, oh, look, there's queer people. They're going to use that however they choose. But it's still a little out of touch. We would love having that plus at the end because it shows that inclusion. We also have the LGBTQIA, but adding that plus at the end is the most progressive, while also the shortest version, somehow, of that title. I will also point out that queer, while again a term used by the community, it's still not something that allies should necessarily use unless they've been given permission to do so. I would only ask Shannon to call me a queer individual when talking about other people because she knows that that's how I identify. But I wouldn't want someone to say, oh, well, that's Tesla, he's queer. Because a lot of people don't understand the context of it's not still a slur. All right, we can go on to the next slide, please. Understanding the challenges that members of this marginalized community face is necessary in order to understand how best to support them. Because we have limited time today, I'm just going to touch briefly upon each of the major highlights of what some of these members of the community go through. But just know that this is the very, very top of what we deal with. So first off, we have a lack of legal protections, and we'll talk about how we can help advocate on behalf of that soon. But not only are we having issues with legal protections, but also protections in health care. Just because we have marriage equality since 2015, which is currently at risk, doesn't mean that we have equal rights right now. And I think it's really important that people realize that. Now, there's also a bunch of anti-LGBTQIA plus legislation. We're going to be talking about that in more detail in a moment. But right now, there's a huge push against this community that is already marginalized, and it means no one any harm. There's also stigma, harassment, and discrimination faced by members of the LGBTQIA plus community on a daily basis, whether that's at school, at work, in their home lives, and in society at large. And that, of course, leads to violence. We have seen a growing amount of violence against the LGBTQIA plus community. Many of you may have seen the news reports in June about the Idaho raid or attempted raid on the Pride event that was luckily stopped. But that violence often leads to the death of members of the community, and especially for our queer and trans people of color. Next slide. Additionally, members of the gender nonconforming or transgender community face additional challenges, and those come in the form of gender dysphoria when people look at them and say, oh, you're obviously your sex assigned at birth, and we're not going to recognize who you really are. But it also might be internalized gender dysphoria. They look at themselves in the mirror and say, that's not, what I see in my mind's eye is not what's showing in my reflection. Going through the process of gender transition is very difficult and has many challenges itself, and the idea of being able to pass in society as within the binary is something that people often will also face. Whether or not a trans woman who's walking down the street comes off as just being seen as a woman, or whether people assume it's a man in a dress. Legal documentation, the process of getting your name changed, the process of getting your birth certificate changed, or even your driver's license changed is very difficult. And also access for public accommodations in bathrooms, locker rooms, and right now, especially for sports participation. And I wish I could say at schools, but now it's at an Olympic level as well. Next slide, please. So, what does it mean to be an ally? And let's talk about that a little bit. Well, being an ally is an active choice. You don't just get to claim the title of being an ally because you have understanding or knowledge of the community. It is an active process, much like our faith is. Allies are important in the fight for equality and equity, and that is especially true because allies have been the reason we have seen so many gains as a community. Marriage equality, I can assure you, would not have passed if it was only the queer people voting for it. It was allies who came and said, no, my children, my siblings, my aunts and uncles, they deserve to have the ability to marry the people that they love. So being an ally is so important for this community because we are in the minority. Being an ally may be new to all of you or some of you, and it's okay if you don't immediately understand everything or immediately get it right. The process of becoming an ally is one of learning. Go ahead and move to the next slide, please. There are thousands of ways to show your support as an ally, and there's no one right way to do it. A few of the major ways of being an ally, though, is using the appropriate language as well as pronouns that people ask you to use for them. Treating members of the LGBTQIA+ community the same way you always have, even before you knew they were out. They are the same person that you know and that you love. Confronting inappropriate language and situations, and we'll talk about how to do that in a safe manner, as well as actively advocating for their inclusion and equity. Next slide. Pronouns are important, and using the correct pronouns not only shows respect for an individual, it acknowledges the person for more than who they are, but also how they identify. You are including the whole person, acknowledging the wholeness of that person when you use the correct pronouns. Not using the correct pronouns is a form of harassment, and that includes doing so unknowingly. And that's why I think it's important that we acknowledge that in the English language, as well as in many other languages, our words are often gendered. And what's important to note is that we need to break this idea of the world being binary. There are so many more attributes of gender than male or female, and it's really helpful when we acknowledge a person's whole gender. And often it is fluid. Someone who likes makeup and lipstick and dressing up may also feel masculine at times. So it's not just about the transgender community, it's about all of us. And it's important not to make assumptions about a person's gender when you just look at them, because they might be expressing themselves differently at any given time. Even if you're correct in making an assumption about someone's gender, you are making a less inclusive community, because whether or not you assume their gender correctly, you might be just saying and signaling that you're not open to hearing about other people's identities, and they might not be as willing to share them with you. We can go ahead and, actually go back to that slide, please. So supporting your loved one who identifies as part of the LGBTQIA+ community is simple, and especially if you follow our UU principles, which hopefully we all are. The best way to support them is by listening respectfully. Be open to learning and growing, receiving feedback graciously, asking forgiveness when we don't respond well, being respectful, and being supportive. Now we can go to the next slide. Another way to be an ally is to confront others when they are harassing someone or using inappropriate language. What is considered inappropriate very much depends on the situation, and it's not always easy to distinguish. Some of the things you might encounter includes terminology that we may have used previously to define the community, but isn't used anymore, or might only be used in the context of a medical connotation. So these might include homosexual. We don't really use that term anymore within the community. Or transsexual. It's very much, both of those terms or medical terms are not very defining of our community in a wholesome way. Other derogatory terms and slurs that were meant either in a joking manner, like saying, "Oh, that's so gay," that's rude, or to purposely offend or insult somebody, saying such as, "You're such a fruit, you're such a fairy, you're such a..." I'm not going to say it. But those words have no place in our society, and they are a form of discrimination. And as Unitarian Universalists, as allies to the LGBTQIA+ community, it is imperative that we address those comments in the moment. Now, how do we do that? When you encounter inappropriate language, the best thing to do, first and foremost, make sure that the person who is being targeted is safe, both physically and emotionally. And it's also important, make sure you're safe too, please. Make sure the environment isn't going to become hostile or threatening or violent. Think before you react. Try to determine if the person is purposely causing harm or doing so based on a lack of understanding and knowledge. One of the best ways to do this is by turning whatever they said into a question, a direct question. Say, what did you mean by that? Or, why do you feel like that's an appropriate thing to say in this situation? Usually, people say things like, oh, that's so gay, because they think it's funny. Or they start insulting people because they're trying to come across as the bigger person, or the person in charge. But questioning their authority, if you do it in a more inclusive way by creating that question, often will put them on their back foot and they'll really think about what's going on. Then set clear boundaries. We don't use that language here. We are trying to create an inclusive environment where everyone feels safe and welcome. That is the best way to handle those situations. Now, one other thing I want to point out with this is remember that sometimes, as allies, we also need to take a step back. When you're checking on that individual to make sure they're safe, also check in and see if they want to do the advocating for themselves. Not all the time. Sometimes being an ally means knowing when to shut your mouth and let the person handle it themselves, because sometimes being able to advocate for ourselves is a form of communication that strengthens our community. All right, next slide. Advocating for our loved ones is the best way to support them, even when they don't realize it, especially when they don't realize it. Right now, our LGBTQIA plus youth feel extremely disenfranchised, not just with the Republican candidates, but also by the Democrats. So I want you to know that LGBTQIA plus youth have no interest in voting. And so we as allies and advocates must show them that the Democrats in general have more of an interest in serving the LGBTQIA plus community. And I'm saying that from the pulpit, I know, but we're going to talk about exactly why. So let's follow our fifth principle regarding the democratic process. By advocating and supporting LGBTQIA plus people, you are setting an example for others to follow. You can write to your federal representatives and tell them to pass the Equality Act right now. This piece of legislation has been stalled for the past decade. And all it would do is ensure equal rights, not just for queer people, also for women, also for people of color. It would end discrimination. So that is one of the most major pieces of legislation that we could see passed in the world, in the United States. But we also need people to start advocating at a grassroots level in our local communities. Last month, during Pride Month, Senate Bill 1277 was introduced by a Republican representative in Lancaster. It is a book and education ban on LGBTQI plus relationships, otherwise known as the Don't Say Gay bill, introduced here in Pennsylvania. That same day, another Lancaster representative introduced 1278, which forces teachers and schools to out a student if they come out to them, to their parents, which could put that child at risk of homelessness, harm at home, and more, and puts in place punishments for the district if the teacher refuses to do so. I will say that, ironically, I had to write an op-ed in direct response to both of these, because at the same time, both of the representatives who introduced these pieces came out and said, we're not against the LGBTQIA plus community. House Bill 972 is making fast progress in our House of our legislative bodies, and it bans transgender athletes from participating in sports against the understanding of science and doctors and all evidence that there is no physical advantage for transgender athletes to participate in sports, especially at the youth level where where the legislators are trying to get rid of it. Senate Bill 106, hopefully everyone's aware of this bill, was recently introduced, is an anti-abortion amendment to the PA Constitution that directly impacts the LGBTQIA plus community, because we too get pregnant, have children, whether or not we want to, often in a form of violence. Next slide, please. Now, I want to talk about the coming out process because it is very important. The process of coming out is a deeply personal process, and there's no one right way to do it. Some people will come out only to a few of their trusted friends or family members, and those family members may not include blood relatives. I'm just going to say that now. And while there's other people that they might come out to everybody. Coming out takes an extraordinary amount of courage, and it isn't something to be taken lightly either by the person doing the coming out or by those that they are telling. When someone comes out to you, it is because they trust you, and they want to show you their authentic selves, and this is a precious gift that they are giving to you. But know that if somebody hasn't come out to you yet, one, don't make assumptions and do not confront them about it. That person may not be ready. They may be still questioning who they are and how they identify. They might not feel safe, especially given our political climate right now. Or they might be still coming to terms on how best to come out to someone. Next slide, please. As allies, the coming out process is similar to supporting our LGBTQIA plus loved ones. First and foremost, we must listen to that person. And when appropriate, ask appropriate questions that are respectful. And when I say that, consider whether or not you'd be comfortable being asked that question. I can assure you, unless you are going into the bedroom with that person, you do not need to know what's in their pants or under their skirt. And I'm pretty sure none of us would like to have that question asked of us either. Be honest. Even if what they're talking about makes you uncomfortable, what is important is having open and honest communication. By doing that, you are showing this person, not only can you trust me, but I trust you back. If needed, please tell the person that you need a bit of time to come to terms with what they've told you, or maybe you need to do additional research. The key is then go and do it. Don't just sit on what they've told you, and don't ever just not address the situation. There are tons of ways to get help through local resources along with online support and research. Next slide, please. Remember that this is their story. And when someone comes out to you, again, they've shared a part of themselves. That does not give you the right to then go and share it with other people. Remember, this is the coming out process. It's endless. People have to come out again and again and again to each individual, and they get to decide how and when and to whom that happens. So be sure to get their permission prior to sharing it on whether or not they want help with the coming out process. Because believe me, when you told people 100 times, oh, I'm now, at some point you're like, okay, and now you can tell other people because it's a lot of work. Next slide. What's important is to always show support, acceptance, and respect for the individual even before they come out. And I think that's very apparent and obvious to us as Unitarian Universalists. We want to really embrace the inherent dignity and worth of every individual. Now remember that the coming out process is difficult. It's often scary, terrifying, because each time someone does it, whether or not they know the person well, they never know how they're really going to react. And sometimes it is violently. So the offering reassurances to that person both before they come out, by speaking well about the LGBTQIA plus community and your acceptance of them, as well as when that person comes out to you, is what's really important and shows that you care and respect them. Next slide. Now, being an ally does not mean sacrificing yourself for the benefit of a member of the LGBTQIA plus community, and it's important to recognize, acknowledge, and tend to your own needs as well. Acknowledging what you're feeling, whether pride, confusion, or discomfort. Again, that open and honest conversation. Take time to work through your feelings, whether that's alone, with someone close to you that already knows that person's come out, or with a therapist is often helpful. Remember that person trusted you with their truth, and you need to show that you were a worthy person to share that with. Next slide, please. Again, recognizing your own needs, use your emotions as a basis for that honest communication, both with the person who came out as well as with others. It's okay if you're not okay with what they've told you yet. Take the time to figure it out yourself. And find support through your local resources like local LGBTQIA plus centers. PFLAG is a great resource for people, the Trevor Project, and many others. Next slide. Being an active ally includes a fun and engaging activities that call upon our UU principles as well as our individual creativity. There's no limit on how to be an ally, so long as we do not center ourselves and our stories rather than the voices of the marginalized community we are trying to uplift. Apparently I lost my page. Next slide, please. Oh, nope, sorry, stay on that slide. So creating inclusive spaces includes, and safe spaces includes all of these options, creating email signatures with your pronouns, badges at work, having diverse and inclusive posters that show different family dynamics. Safety pins are a great way to show that you're a safe person to come out to, as well as having pride flags around. Creating gender-neutral facilities, including bathrooms and locker rooms. I'm grateful that the UUCY has those, but we encourage you to help your work offices and schools also provide those. And creating supportive environments and groups for the community. Now we can go to the next slide, sorry. Support and volunteer with organizations that support the LGBTQIA+ community, whether that's your local resource centers, PFLAG chapters. Planned Parenthood especially takes a lot of the health care on for the LGBTQIA+ community, including just this year offering gender nonconforming members of the community access to hormone replacement therapy. Very important, making it more accessible, and of course sponsoring and attending local pride events, which I know many of you have been attending in the past, as well as last month when we did our first in-person York County Pride. So let me see. I know what happened to that page. All right, like I said, there are numerous local resources available to help both the LGBTQIA+ community as well as ourselves as allies. These include the Rainbow Rose Center, which serves York County's LGBTQIA+ community, PFLAG York, which supports especially the parents, families, and friends of the LGBTQIA+ community, as well as Planned Parenthood's The Curve, which is for LGBTQIA+ youth ages 14 to 21 and meets weekly. There are also plenty of online resources to help you further your education. I'd be happy to provide anyone with those if they're interested. Again, thank you so much for having me today in the pulpit and for taking the time to learn about all this community. I will be here for a short while after the service to answer questions, but let's go ahead and move it right along to our next segment.
Our responsive reading today comes from the UU Reverend Emeritus Elizabeth Ketchum, who retired from professional ministry in 2019 after 20 years of ordained service. Her poem is titled, "May We Live in the Spirit of Pride," and it is a call to action for this and every month. With gratitude for the freedom to be our true, authentic selves, may we live in the spirit of pride. With the courage that comes from challenging fear, may we live in the spirit of pride. With sorrow for those who could not be here with us today, and in honor of those who died of AIDS or who lost their lives, may we live in the spirit of pride. With grief for those whose pain was unbearable and who left us too soon, may we live in the spirit of pride. Looking ahead to the justice still withheld, may we live in the spirit of pride. With the confidence that a sense of community banishes isolation and loneliness, may we live in the spirit of pride. With the rainbow flag flying high, a sense of beloved community among us, and the joy that comes from making new connections, may we live in the spirit of pride.
We are setting the rainbow table. We are planning a giant feast. We are birthing a new creation for the lowly, the lost and least. At that table will sit the weary, knowing welcome in their souls. that table for the broken. They are whole. Come and sit at the rainbow table, full of color and bathed in light. Come and learn how the rainbow table offers grace to our rainbow lives. Come and learn how the rainbow table offers grace to our rainbow lives.
Please join us in extinguishing our chalice and your home chalices, if you have lit them, with these words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
You're not sure who you really are, when all you feel is the shape of your scars, and you have more wounds than you can count. Open your eyes, look all around. You aren't alone, this is your home. Come and remember who you are here. Do this to remember who I am. Come and remember you belong here. All belong here. When you don't know how to forgive, when locked doors seem like the only way to live, and you've got more questions than you can count. Open your eyes, look all around. You aren't alone, this is your home. Come and remember who you are here. Do this to remember who I am. Come and remember you belong here.
When I first came to the UUCY, I was sitting just over there, and during the introduction, the words were, "You are welcome here, whomever you love, whatever your gender." And I knew I was welcome here. Throughout this service, we have shared music, mostly from Dr. Amanda Udis Kessler, who received her PhD in sociology from Boston College and is the director of institutional research and planning at Colorado College. She is the creator of a website and resource called Queer Sacred Music. And as a married, white, and lesbian woman, she created these progressive, inclusive songs that are very social justice oriented for both Christians, specifically for Unitarian Universalists, and also for other open-hearted religious traditions. I chose these songs because I wanted us to find community, to find spirituality in the service that was very educational, but also because the UUA has failed to include our voices in our hymnals. There are 3 pieces in our 2 hymnals that say "For Pride," and we use them for every service oriented towards this. We need more music. We need more representation in our faith, in our music, everywhere. I know that today's conversations, the presentation, cover a lot of heavy topics, but I want us to go away from here with the understanding that each of us, and especially the LGBTQIA+ community, is born out of the essence of joy and out of the context of disappointment. In this final musical piece, which is by the Resistance Revival Chorus titled "This Joy," may we carry that sentiment into our lives, into our communities, and into our hearts.
This joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. Oh, this joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. Don't you know that? This joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. Oh, I said the world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. Oh, this strength that I have, this strength that I have, this strength that I have. Oh, yeah, now. The world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it to me. This strength that I have. Oh, yeah. The world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it to me. This strength that I have. Oh, yeah. The world didn't give it to me. Oh, I said the world didn't give it. The world can't take it away. Oh, this love that I have. This love that I have. Oh, yeah, now. The world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it to me. This love that I have. Oh, yeah. The world didn't give it to me. Don't you know that? This love that I have, yeah. The world didn't give it to me. Singing, the world didn't give it. The world can't take it away. Oh, this pride that I have, this pride that I have. This pride that I have. Oh, yeah, now. The world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it to me. This pride that I have. I said the world didn't give it to me. Don't you know that? This pride that I have, yeah. The world didn't give it to me. Oh, I said the world didn't give it. The world can't take it away. All this peace that I have, oh, yeah. The world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give me my peace that I have. Oh, yeah, now. The world didn't give it to me. Won't you sing about peace? This peace that I have. Oh, yeah, now. The world didn't give it to me. I said the world didn't give it. The world can't take it away. All this joy
The world didn't give it to me. Don't you know that this joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. Oh, I said the world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. The world didn't give it and the world can't take it away. The world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. The world didn't give it and the world can't take it away. The world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. The world didn't give it and the world can't take it away. The world didn't give it, the world can't take it away.
Resistance Revival Chorus believes in the words written by the poet Toy Darracott when she wrote, "Joy is an act of resistance." We believe in the words of Mr. Harry Belafonte, who said, "When the movement is strong, the music is strong." We sing to revive the hearts of those who fight for social justice, and we sing together for freedom.